My name is Roberta B. Auzen, and I'm 18 years old. I found out my sister was secretly taking money from her fiancé, and my parents helped cover it up because it benefited them too. They pressured me to keep quiet, but I said one word that changed everything. I grew up in one of those families where love felt like a performance review. You hit your metrics, you got a pat on the head, you missed the mark, you got a lecture about potential and disappointment. At least that is how it worked for me. My sister Natalie operated under a completely different system. Same house, different universe. I figured this out around age 7. I brought home a report card with straight A and 1 A minus in gymnastics. My mother barely looked up from her phone. She asked why I had not tried harder. 2 weeks later, Natalie brought home B and C, and they took her out for ice cream to celebrate her improvement. I sat at the kitchen table doing homework, listening to the garage door close behind them, and understood exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. Cold lesson to learn at 7, but better to learn it early than never, I guess. My parents ran a successful accounting firm in suburban Virginia. They lived and breathed appearances. You know the type, the Christmas card family with matching sweaters and practiced smiles. The narrative they sold to the world was two accomplished children destined for greatness. The reality behind closed doors was a completely different story, and the cost of maintaining that illusion was always paid by whoever was easiest to pressure. My father built his entire identity around professional success and social positioning. He sat on the country club board, donated to the right charities, worked every room like he was calculating the transactional value of each handshake. My mother was his perfect complement. She hosted dinner parties with magazine-worthy table settings, volunteered at the organizations that mattered, and befriended women whose husbands could benefit Dad's business. Together, they constructed this facade of family perfection, and maintaining it required total cooperation from their children. Natalie understood this game instinctively. She charmed Dad's clients, complimented Mom's hosting skills with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm, and presented exactly the image of accomplished young womanhood they wanted to project. Her actual behavior behind closed doors mattered so little compared to her public performance. I absorbed that lesson over years of watching her escape consequences that would have absolutely destroyed me. She was 3 years older, born with this effortless charm that I never inherited. Teachers forgave her late assignments. Boys tripped over themselves around her. She sailed through high school with mediocre grades that never warranted concern and an uncanny ability to redirect blame. I watched from the sidelines, taking mental notes on survival in a household where favoritism operated as openly as the central heating system. There were moments when the unfairness felt crushing. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. Why were Natalie's failures treated as charming quirks, while my minor imperfections became evidence of character flaws? But around 14, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity. I stopped expecting fairness. I started expecting patterns. Once I recognized the predictable, unjust rules of our family dynamics, I could navigate them. Emotion gave way to strategy. Hurt transformed into careful observation. My bedroom became my sanctuary. Maps of distant places covered the walls. Books about people who overcame impossible circumstances filled my shelves. I spent hours researching universities far enough from Virginia that casual parental drop-ins would be impractical. Every essay I wrote, every extracurricular I joined, every test I aced, all of it was another brick in the wall I was building between my present circumstances and my future freedom. By junior year, I had built an entire identity around being Natalie's opposite. Where she was social, I was studious. Where she was reckless, I was calculated. My walls displayed academic trophies. Hers were plastered with concert tickets and party Polaroids. My parents saw Natalie as vibrant, full of life. They saw me as dependable, which loosely translated to invisible. Then, the summer before my senior year, I discovered something that would become my insurance policy. Natalie had been dating Brandon Montgomery, the son of my father's biggest client. Brandon drove a BMW, wore watches that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and treated my sister like a decorative accessory. Their relationship was the pride of my parents' social ambitions. They practically glowed when Brandon came over. Dad would talk investments. Mom would fuss over appetizers like royalty had arrived. The possibility of their daughter marrying into the Montgomery family represented everything they had worked for, a permanent elevation of our name into genuinely elite social circles. They were so blinded by the potential benefits that they never questioned Natalie's affection for the guy. But I noticed the inconsistencies from day one. Natalie complained about Brandon constantly when our parents were not around. His conversation skills, his fashion choices, his insufferable habit of talking about sailing. She would roll her eyes at his texts, cancel plans to meet other guys whose existence she carefully hid. The disconnect between her public performance as the devoted girlfriend and her private contempt was jarring, even for someone accustomed to her duplicity. And the more I watched, the more I realized this wasn't just another Natalie phase. This was a long game. This was my parents' dream on one side and my sister's appetite on the other. And somewhere in the middle was a man who thought he was being loved. I didn't know yet how ugly it would get. I didn't know there would be spreadsheets and totals and notes about which tiers worked best. I didn't know my parents would help cover it up with the same smooth professionalism they used to file taxes for people who thought the Collins household was perfect. All I knew back then was that something felt wrong, and in my family, wrong things stayed wrong until someone with less power finally paid for it. My parents treated Brandon like a trophy that came with a pulse. When he showed up, my father became louder, funnier, more generous with compliments, like he was auditioning for a permanent seat at the Montgomery table. My mother would rearrange appetizers as if plating could rewrite class boundaries. Natalie played her role flawlessly in front of them, leaning into Brandon's arm, laughing at jokes she'd later call stupid, and letting that oversized ring of attention glitter in every conversation. But behind closed doors, her performance cracked. She would flop onto her bed and mock Brandon's sailing voice, roll her eyes at his texts, complain about how boring his friends were, then turn around and send him a sweet message with a heart emoji that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just lying, it was contempt wrapped in velvet. My parents didn't see it because they didn't want to. Brandon represented a pipeline to better circles, bigger clients, and the kind of status my father treated like oxygen. The relationship was the pride of their social ambition, and the thought of it collapsing seemed to terrify them more than any truth. What they didn't know was Natalie wasn't just dating Brandon, she was draining him. I found out by accident. My laptop crashed one night during a study session, and I asked Natalie if I could borrow hers for an hour. She tossed it to me, without looking up from her phone, confident and careless, the way people are when they believe the world bends around their charm. Her browser was still open. Bank statements, screenshots, text conversations. I stared for a second, thinking maybe she was helping Brandon with something financial. Then I saw my sister's name attached to transfers that didn't look like gifts. They looked like withdrawals. I scrolled, and my stomach tightened. The numbers weren't small. Thousands here, thousands there. Then I saw the most disturbing thing of all, a spreadsheet. Not a budget, not a savings plan, a tracking system. Columns labeled with dates and amounts. Notes, emotional angles, little descriptions of which story she used, which vulnerability she exploited, how quickly Brandon responded. One entry read, "Told him my car needed repairs, cried about feeling like a burden, got $3,500. Another said, "Another investment opportunity pitch. Used business terminology Dad taught me. $8,000 transfer confirmed." She was treating fraud like a project management exercise. Running totals, projected future extractions. It wasn't impulsive, it wasn't messy, it was calculated. I sat in her room for nearly an hour, scrolling through months of deception, feeling my pulse thud in my ears. Brandon wasn't exactly a sympathetic figure with his entitled attitude, but nobody deserved to be systematically exploited by someone pretending to love them. The scale of it exceeded even my most cynical expectations of Natalie. My first instinct was to march downstairs and shove the laptop in my parents' faces, to finally prove what I'd known my whole life, that Natalie wasn't just favored, she was protected. But that impulse lasted about 30 seconds. 18 years of data told me exactly what would happen. They'd minimize it, excuse it, or blame me for discovering it. The evidence would be dismissed. I would be punished for snooping. Natalie would cry, and the house would tilt toward her like it always did. So I did something else. I took screenshots, every page, every statement, every note, every entry. Then I uploaded them to a secure cloud folder. Call it paranoia. Call it preparation. Something in me knew those files would matter someday. And once I started, it became almost meditative. Over the following months, whenever opportunity presented itself, her phone unlocked on the counter, her bragging calls with friends that she didn't know I could hear, I documented everything. Each new piece went into my growing digital archive, organized by date, categorized by type of misconduct. I told myself I was just being prudent, maintaining records. The reality was more complicated. Part of me wanted validation, proof that my perceptions of our family dynamics weren't paranoid delusions. Another part wanted insurance, protection against future scenarios where Natalie's manipulations might target me directly. And yeah, a small part of me wanted ammunition. Weapons I could deploy if circumstances ever demanded self-defense. Senior year unfolded with the predictable rhythm of college applications and family dinners, where my accomplishments were acknowledged with brief nods, while Natalie's latest drama commanded the spotlight. By then she had graduated, supposedly attending community college while living at home, though her actual schedule seemed to consist primarily of brunch dates and shopping trips funded by Brandon's ongoing generosity. My college counselor, Mrs. Henderson, became an unexpected ally. She recognized something in me, maybe the exhaustion of constantly performing adequacy in a household that demanded perfection while rewarding mediocrity in my sibling. During our sessions, she encouraged me to aim high, reminding me my record positioned me for schools that had seemed impossible to my freshman self. The acceptance letters arrived like permission slips for a life I had barely dared to imagine. Georgetown's thick envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with possibility and the promise of distance. I opened it alone in my bedroom, reading the words 3 times before allowing myself to believe they were real. For the first time in 18 years, something I wanted had materialized through my own effort, rather than parental approval or sibling manipulation. I applied to 12 universities, got into 10. Georgetown became my top choice, a prestigious program that would put physical distance between me and our household dynamics. My parents agreed to fund my education with the same lukewarm enthusiasm they applied to everything involving me. It was an investment in the family reputation, not an expression of parental pride. The tuition conversation still replays in my memory with perfect clarity. My father behind his desk reviewing the financial aid package, calculating our family's contribution like a business acquisition, evaluating return on investment. My mother suggested the state school, something closer where they could keep an eye on me. The implication that I needed supervision while Natalie had been trusted independently wasn't lost on me. I pushed back gently, citing Georgetown's rankings, framing my ambitions in the language of reputation enhancement they understood. They eventually agreed, though my father made sure I knew continued funding depended on sustained academic performance and appropriate behavior. Translation: stay useful. Stay quiet. Do not embarrass us. I didn't argue, I just nodded, and I kept building my folder. The fall semester of my freshman year felt like stepping into oxygen after years of recycled air. For the first time, I existed outside Natalie's shadow. Professors knew my name because I contributed, not because I was someone's sister. My classmates didn't compare me to a louder, shinier version of myself. They just met Roberta. I kept a near-perfect GPA and picked up a part-time job at the campus library. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, my own schedule, my own paycheck, my own quiet corner where I could exist without being graded on how well I upheld a family brand. That's where I met Ryan. He was my roommate and quickly became my first real friend outside the social ecosystem my parents had curated. His family had recently moved to the D.C. area, and he talked about them with a casual warmth that confused me at first. His siblings supported each other. His parents expressed pride without conditions attached. When he described holidays, it felt like anthropological research into a culture I had never visited. He listened to my stories about home, the edited versions at first, then the more honest ones. And one night he said something nobody had ever said to me before. "That's not normal," he said gently. "That's not healthy." Nobody had named it so directly. The favoritism, the transactional affection, the pressure to protect the family image at any cost. Hearing it labeled didn't fix anything, but it cracked something open. It meant I wasn't crazy. Thanksgiving break brought me back to Virginia and slammed that crack shut. Natalie was engaged. I walked into the house and felt the atmosphere before anyone said a word. My mother was practically vibrating. My father was pacing with purpose. Natalie stood in the center of the living room, arm extended just enough to ensure the diamond caught the light. It was obscene. A stone so large it looked theatrical, like something rented for a movie. Brandon beamed beside her, radiating proprietary satisfaction. My parents looked like they had personally closed a billion-dollar deal. The engagement wasn't just romantic, it was strategic. It was social capital. It was validation that our family had arrived. Nobody asked about my semester. Nobody asked about my classes or my friends or the way my life had expanded beyond their expectations. The conversation belonged to Natalie and the wedding, the venue in Costa Rica, the guest list, the networking implications. My father spoke about invitations like chess moves. During dinner, Natalie turned to me with misty eyes and declared she wanted me in the wedding party. She wrapped the request in performative sibling affection, complete with talk about how much I meant to her. My parents beamed. I said yes. Refusing would have detonated a scene that would follow me back to campus in the form of guilt-laced phone calls and tuition threats disguised as concern. The real reason behind the invitation revealed itself almost immediately. Natalie began calling constantly. At first it was wedding help. Then it became something else. She needed me to cover for her when she missed bridal appointments to meet other men. She wanted me to confirm alibis when she told Brandon she was visiting relatives. She needed me to memorize details about a fabricated investment scheme so I could answer casually if Brandon's father asked questions. She pushed me deeper and deeper into complicity. One night, she called me in a panic because Brandon's family had started asking about the returns on the business opportunity she had convinced him to fund. She dictated talking points for me to use if I was ever asked directly. She framed it as loyalty, as sisterhood, as protecting the family. Every call left me feeling smaller, dirtier, like I was being recruited into something corrosive. The stress started seeping into everything. I couldn't sleep. My appetite disappeared. I'd stare at textbooks without absorbing a word. Ryan noticed before I admitted anything. "What is she making you do?" he asked one night, when I flinched at another incoming call from Natalie. I told him everything. The spreadsheet, the manipulation, the demands for alibis, the threats wrapped in sibling affection. Saying it out loud felt like cracking a window in a room I'd been suffocating in for years. Ryan didn't judge. He didn't dramatize. He did something much more powerful. He helped me plan. We researched transfer options, financial aid alternatives, contingency plans in case my parents ever tried to use tuition as leverage. Georgetown had a lesser-known alternative program that offered reduced tuition in exchange for a modified schedule. I applied quietly, telling no one. It was insurance, not a plan. Over winter break, Natalie's pressure intensified. Christmas Eve loomed, and my parents were hosting their annual holiday party, the kind where the house smelled like cinnamon and pine and everything sparkled just enough to distract from what lived underneath. Brandon's family would be there, the Montgomerys, the clients who mattered most. I arrived home 3 days before the party and counted the hours until I could return to campus. The house buzzed with manufactured cheer. My mother orchestrated decorations like a stage director. My father rehearsed conversations he planned to have with Brandon's father. Natalie practiced smiles and mirrors. And I watched the machine spin faster, knowing exactly how fragile it actually was. The Christmas Eve party was my parents at their most polished. The house glowed under soft white lights. Silver trays carried appetizers that looked too perfect to eat. My mother moved through the rooms like a conductor, adjusting, correcting, smiling on cue. My father shook hands with men who measured value in billable hours and golf club memberships. Natalie wore a red dress designed to complement the ring. She angled her hand constantly, letting the diamond catch every possible reflection. Brandon hovered beside her, proud and oblivious. The entire room seemed to orbit them. I stationed myself near the drinks table, sparkling cider in hand, offering polite smiles when spoken to. I had perfected invisibility. I thought I could get through the night by staying quiet. Then Victoria Montgomery found me. She approached with a pleasant smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Roberta," she said warmly, "it's been a while. How is Georgetown treating you?" We exchanged small talk, the kind that sounds effortless but carries weight. Then her tone shifted almost imperceptibly. "I wanted to ask you something," she said. "I used to work in forensic accounting before I retired. Old habits die hard. I've noticed a few inconsistencies in some of the numbers Brandon has mentioned recently." Ice slid down my spine. She wasn't asking casually, she was probing, testing. Investment returns, she continued lightly. Timing on certain transfers. I suppose I'm just curious whether Natalie has mentioned anything to you. The room seemed to narrow around us. Every instinct I had developed screamed at me to deflect, smile, protect the narrative, keep the machine running. That was the family rule. But something inside me had been cracking for months. Every late night call where Natalie coached me on lies. Every time my parents ignored what they didn't want to see. Every time I was asked to sacrifice truth for appearance. Victoria's gaze held steady. She already suspected. She just needed confirmation. I could have lied. Instead, I heard myself say it. Quiet, measured, controlled. You're right to be concerned. That was it. No documents, no accusations. Just confirmation that her instincts weren't paranoia. Victoria's expression changed almost imperceptibly. She nodded once. Thank you, she said. I walked away before I could lose my nerve. Within 20 minutes, the energy in the house shifted. Victoria pulled Brandon aside. Brandon's posture stiffened. Natalie's smile faltered. Voices rose in the hallway near my father's study. An hour later, the party had cleared out. Guests left with tight smiles and hurried goodbyes. The illusion had cracked. I stood in my father's study facing a tribunal. My father positioned himself behind his desk like a judge delivering a verdict. My mother stood to his right, her face blotchy with humiliation. Natalie sat in the leather chair reserved for important clients, tissue in hand, mascara perfectly intact despite the performance of tears. The accusations came fast. I was jealous. I was resentful. I was sabotaging Natalie's happiness. I had embarrassed my father in front of his most important client. I had damaged a business relationship that took years to cultivate. I tried to speak. I explained what Natalie had done. The money, the manipulation, the spreadsheet. My words bounced off walls of denial like rubber bullets. Natalie cried harder. She called me unstable, said I'd always hated her, claimed I fabricated everything because I couldn't stand to see her succeed. The patterns held. They always held. Then my father delivered his ultimatum. My tuition payments would be suspended immediately unless I issued a full, sincere apology. To Natalie, to Brandon, to both sets of parents. I would spend the remainder of winter break writing letters, apologizing for my disgraceful accusations. Only after demonstrating appropriate remorse would they consider continuing to fund my education. The threat landed exactly as he intended, a financial guillotine. Without their tuition, Georgetown would be out of reach. I would return home in defeat. Dependent. Corrected. Natalie watched me carefully. She expected tears, panic, negotiation. Instead, I felt something calm settle in my chest. Fine. That was the word. I didn't shout it. I didn't argue. I said it the way someone accepts a fact. Then I turned and walked upstairs. Behind me, my mother asked my father if they had been too harsh. My father responded with complete confidence. She'll come around by morning. She has no other choice. He was wrong. Because while Natalie had been perfecting her manipulation spreadsheet, I had been building my exit strategy. The alternative Georgetown program acceptance had been sitting in my inbox for 3 weeks. Reduced tuition, flexible scheduling, same degree. I had savings from my library job and summer earnings in an account my parents couldn't access. Ryan had helped me open it at a separate bank, routing deposits through channels they couldn't monitor. We had calculated scenarios for everything from temporary tuition gaps to full independence. At 2 a.m., I confirmed my transfer into the modified program and paid the deposit with my own money. Then I packed, methodically, quietly. Clothes into suitcases, books into boxes, laptop secured in my carry-on. I stripped my childhood bedroom of anything that mattered, leaving behind the curated version my mother had decorated. By 6 a.m., everything that defined me was packed. A rideshare waited outside. I carried the last box downstairs and found my entire family gathered in the living room, still in pajamas. My father stood with arms crossed, wearing plaid pants and a Georgetown Dad t-shirt. My mother clutched her robe. Natalie already had a tissue in hand, ready for the next act. What do you think you're doing? My mother demanded. I'm leaving, I said calmly. My transfer's approved. My first semester is paid. I have a place to stay until housing opens. Silence fell heavy. My father's face changed first. Understanding dawned. His leverage was gone. Natalie's expression shifted from confidence to unease. Please tell me you didn't send it, she whispered. Send what? My father asked sharply. I let the moment stretch. Then I answered. I emailed Brandon everything. The silence after I said it felt physical, like oxygen had been vacuumed out of the room. Everything? My father asked, and for the first time in my life, his voice carried something close to fear. Everything, I repeated. The bank statements, the texts, the spreadsheet, the recorded calls, all of it. Natalie's face went white, not the theatrical pale she used when she wanted sympathy. This was different. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked smaller, like someone had suddenly stripped away her stage lighting. My mother made a strangled sound. You wouldn't, she said. You wouldn't do that to your sister. I already did, I replied. I scheduled the email to send at midnight. That part wasn't entirely true. I hadn't scheduled it. I'd sent it deliberately at 2 a.m., after confirming my transfer and packing the first round of boxes. But the image of inevitability, of something unstoppable already in motion, landed harder than admitting it was a choice. By now, I said, Brandon had seen it. And given how early the Montgomerys wake up, I suspected his parents had too. My father grabbed his phone and started dialing. His composure cracked. He stepped away toward the kitchen, voice low and urgent. My mother stood frozen. Natalie stared at me, like she was trying to memorize my face. Then the phone connected. I could hear only my father's side of the conversation at first. He attempted charm, clarification, damage control. Then his voice faltered. He went quiet. When he hung up, his complexion had shifted to gray. The engagement is terminated, he said flatly. Their attorneys will be in contact, and Montgomery Industries is reviewing its relationship with our firm. That last sentence hit the hardest. Montgomery Industries represented nearly a third of my father's firm's annual revenue. Losing them wasn't symbolic, it was catastrophic. Natalie let out a sound halfway between a sob and a gasp. You ruined everything, she said to me, voice shaking. You couldn't just let me be happy. Happy? I asked, and the word tasted bitter. You stole $40,000 from him. I was going to pay it back, she snapped. It was temporary. Temporary theft is still theft, I said. My mother found her voice. You humiliated this family, she said. Do you have any idea what people will say? Yes, I answered calmly. They'll say the truth. My father stepped closer. You don't understand what you've done, he said. This could destroy my firm. No, I replied. What Natalie did could destroy it. I just refused to keep protecting it. The rideshare pulled into the driveway. I could see it through the front window. My escape, sitting patiently at the curb. I picked up my final box. Stay, my father demanded. His voice had shifted from authoritarian to pleading. I had never heard that tone from him before. We can fix this. We can manage the fallout. You've been managing fallout my entire life, I said. This time, you don't get to. I walked to the door. Roberta, my mother called after me. There was something different in her voice now. Not fury, not strategy, something closer to shock. I paused at the threshold. You're tearing this family apart, she said. I turned back once. It was already torn, I replied. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Then I stepped outside. The cold air hit my face like clarity. I loaded my boxes into the trunk and slid into the back seat. As the car pulled away, I looked through the rear window at my family standing on the porch in their pajamas. Natalie clutching her robe, my mother rigid, my father stunned. For 18 years, I had believed I had no leverage. It turns out, I just needed to stop protecting theirs. The weeks that followed were a blur of fallout. Brandon ended the engagement immediately. His family demanded full repayment of the money Natalie had extracted. Their attorneys were efficient and relentless. The Montgomery business account was withdrawn from my father's firm within days. Word spread quietly through the country club network. My cousin Kevin texted updates like live commentary. Clients began asking questions. Natalie's social circle evaporated almost overnight. Friends who had admired her lifestyle distanced themselves once details leaked. The suburban gossip network did what it always does. It turned whispers into reputational earthquakes. My parents tried to spin it. They told relatives it was a misunderstanding, a family dispute blown out of proportion by an ungrateful younger daughter. I didn't respond. I returned to Georgetown, moved into the modified program, and got to work. The tuition was tighter, my schedule heavier, but the air felt cleaner. Every dollar I earned tasted like autonomy. Every decision I made belonged to me. Ryan's family let me stay in their guest room in Arlington until student housing opened. His mother made breakfast every morning and asked about my classes without attaching conditions to her curiosity. His father offered advice about financial planning without calculating return on investment. Watching them interact felt like studying a foreign language, one where affection didn't require performance. By February, I had a rhythm. Classes, library shifts, research. The folder of evidence remained in the cloud, untouched now, but still there. Insurance had done its job. My parents called. I let it go to voicemail. Emails arrived. I didn't open them. A letter showed up at my campus mailbox. I returned it unopened. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Natalie texted me once that spring, a long paragraph about misunderstandings and how siblings shouldn't destroy each other. I replied with 2 sentences. I wish you well. I'm not interested. She didn't respond. For the first time in my life, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. Spring semester ended with honors. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't post about it. I just took the train back to DC and started a summer internship at a small consulting firm that cared more about competence than last names. My supervisor, a man named Robert, had built his career from nothing after a messy family split of his own. He recognized something in me I didn't fully understand yet. Not anger, not revenge, just discipline sharpened by necessity. He mentored me in ways that extended beyond spreadsheets and client meetings. He taught me how to build credit, how to negotiate salary, how to read contracts without trusting the person handing them to me. Meanwhile, the aftershocks back home continued. Kevin texted me one afternoon with a link to a local business blog. Montgomery Industries had formally severed ties with my father's firm. The statement was polite but final. In light of recent developments, we have chosen to move our financial services elsewhere. 30% of my father's annual revenue evaporated overnight. That was just the first domino. Clients talk, especially in suburban Virginia, where country club gossip travels faster than facts. Questions started surfacing about internal practices at Collins Accounting. The Montgomery incident wasn't framed as fraud publicly, but it was enough to crack the illusion of control. Natalie moved back home full-time. No more engagement. No more brunch photos. No more glittering ring angled toward the camera. Kevin said she'd stopped posting on social media entirely. The diamond had vanished. The Montgomery attorneys ensured repayment. $40,000 plus interest. I heard my parents had taken out a loan against their house to cover it. The irony didn't escape me. They'd once threatened my education over an apology letter. Now they were mortgaging their stability to cover my sister's deception. In July, I signed a lease on a studio apartment that required 3 locks on the door and came with questionable plumbing. It was small, loud, and imperfect. It was mine. Ryan visited once and declared it tiny but perfect. We assembled a thrift store bookshelf that nearly defeated us. I laughed harder that night than I had in years, not because everything was easy, but because nothing required pretending. By the time my sophomore year began, the modified program felt natural. The reduced tuition meant longer hours at work, but I preferred exhaustion from effort over exhaustion from manipulation. 8 months after Christmas Eve, Natalie sent another message. This one was longer, softer. She talked about growth, about realizing she'd made mistakes, about how losing Brandon had opened her eyes. She didn't mention the spreadsheet. She didn't mention the money. She didn't mention the way she'd let me take the blame in my father's study. I responded with 2 lines again. I hope you're doing better. I'm not interested in revisiting this. She never replied. My parents stayed silent until graduation day. They didn't show up. Instead, a card arrived at my apartment with a $10,000 check and a note that said, "We're proud of you." No apology, no acknowledgement, just money. I deposited it. I sent a brief thank you. That was it. 3 weeks later, I boarded a flight to Boston for my new job. The consulting firm had offered me a full-time position. Robert had vouched for me. I shook hands with partners who had no idea about my family implosion. They knew me as reliable, analytical, calm under pressure. It turns out those skills were forged long before any corporate training. 2 years later, Kevin texted me another link. This time it wasn't a blog, it was an article in a regional business paper. My father's firm had been hit with a lawsuit. After losing Montgomery Industries, he had started cutting corners to keep other clients satisfied. Aggressive interpretations of tax codes, questionable adjustments. One of those clients got audited. The house of cards collapsed quickly. There were investigations, hearings. My father lost his CPA license permanently. The firm dissolved. I read the article twice. Then I closed the browser and went back to my spreadsheet at work. Not my circus anymore. Kevin kept me updated anyway. My parents sold the big house with the manicured lawn and 3-car garage. They moved into a condo. My mother took a part-time retail job. My father did freelance bookkeeping for small businesses who didn't know his history. Natalie got a job at a real estate office doing admin work. No more luxury, no more curated image. Kevin mentioned she'd gained weight and stopped going out as much. The Montgomery family recovered their money. Brandon moved on. I ran into him exactly once at a conference in Chicago. I was representing my firm. He was there with his father's company. He recognized me first. I braced for tension. Instead, he shook my hand and said, "Thank you." He told me the email had been the wake-up call he needed. He'd been blinded by Natalie's performance. After the breakup, he'd done some serious self-reflection about why he'd been such an easy target. He was engaged now to a woman he'd met through work, someone grounded. We exchanged business cards out of politeness and went our separate ways. That moment felt like the final page of a chapter I didn't need to reread. The last time I saw my family was at my grandmother's funeral 3 years ago. I sat in the back row. They sat in the front. My father looked older, smaller. My mother's posture had softened. Natalie approached me in the parking lot afterward. "Can we talk?" she asked. I gave her 5 minutes. She told me losing everything had forced her to look at herself. She had a steady job now, a small apartment, a rescue dog. Nothing flashy, but it was hers. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for help. She just wanted me to know she understood why I'd done what I did. I told her I appreciated her saying that. Then I got into my rental car and drove to the airport. She texted me on my birthday that year. I sent back a thumbs up emoji. That's the extent of our relationship now, and I'm fine with that. My parents send Christmas cards. I send them back. We've had exactly 2 phone calls in 5 years, both under 3 minutes, both painfully awkward. They've never apologized. I've never asked them to. Because the truth is, I didn't say one word that changed everything because it was dramatic. I said it because it was honest. Fine, that was the word. Fine meant I was done negotiating with people who only valued me when I was useful. Fine meant I was willing to lose their approval to keep my integrity. Fine meant I had already built a life that didn't depend on their permission. They thought they were threatening my future. They didn't realize I had already secured it. The last time I stood in the same physical space as my entire family was at my grandmother's funeral. I almost didn't go. Not because I didn't love her, but because I knew what the room would feel like. Grief layered over history, politeness layered over resentment, appearances layered over truth. I flew in that morning and kept to myself, sitting in the back row of the chapel. My parents sat in the front with Natalie. They looked older than I remembered, smaller. Time had a way of sanding down sharp edges, whether you deserved it or not. My father's posture had developed a permanent stoop. The man who once commanded rooms now stared mostly at his hands. My mother's hair had gone fully gray. She still wore tasteful black, still composed her face carefully, but the effort showed now. Natalie caught my eye once during the service, not with hostility, not with triumph, just something quieter, recognition, maybe. After the burial, she found me in the parking lot. No theatrics, no tears, no performance. "Can we talk?" she asked. I checked my watch. 5 minutes felt fair. She stood with her hands each shoved into the pockets of her coat like she needed somewhere to put them. "I get it now," she said. "What you did, why you did it." I didn't respond immediately. I'd learned the power of silence. "Losing everything forced me to look at myself," she continued. "I have a job now, a real one. I rent a small apartment. I adopted a rescue dog. It's not glamorous, but it's mine." There was no request attached to her words. No angle. No attempt to recruit me into some new narrative. "I'm not asking for anything," she added. "I just wanted you to know I understand." The younger version of me would have searched for subtext, for manipulation, for leverage hidden in sentiment. The version of me standing there simply nodded. "I appreciate you saying that," I told her. That was it. No hug, no promise to rebuild, no reopening of doors I had carefully closed. I got into my rental car and drove to the airport. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing in the parking lot alone, not abandoned, just separate. She texted me on my birthday that year. "Hope you're well." I sent back a thumbs up emoji. That's the extent of our relationship now, and I'm fine with that. My parents send Christmas cards every year, generic updates, pictures from their condo, mentions of volunteer work. There's never an apology. There's never an acknowledgement of what happened. I send a card back, neutral, polite. We've had exactly 2 phone calls in 5 years, both under 3 minutes, both painfully awkward. They ask about work. I answer briefly. I ask about their health. They answer briefly. Then we hang up. They have never said the word sorry. I have never asked them to. Because here's the thing I learned when I packed that bedroom at 6 in the morning. Closure isn't something other people hand you. It's something you build yourself. I don't need their apology to validate what happened. I lived it, I documented it, I survived it. Sometimes people ask if I regret detonating the illusion that Christmas Eve, if I ever wish I'd stayed quiet, if I ever think about how different things might have been. I do think about it, and every time I land in the same place. If I had stayed quiet, I would still be living inside someone else's narrative. I would still be the responsible daughter who cleaned up her sister's messes and swallowed her own truth to protect a family brand. Instead, I have a career I built without leverage, a home I pay for myself, friends who know me without conditions, and a life that doesn't require pretending. The one word that changed everything wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with fireworks. It was simple. Fine. Fine meant I was done negotiating with people who only valued me when I was useful. Fine meant I accepted their ultimatum and removed myself from the board. Fine meant I was choosing truth over comfort. They thought they were cornering me. They didn't realize I had already found the exit, and I would choose that exit every single time.